Sounds like laughter. It's actually gotten closer since it started. It's probably only 200 feet, 300 feet from me right now. I don't know what it is, or what that is going off right there. You can hear it. I think that was a gunshot.
The creepiest thing on this planet, in my personal opinion, is what lurks in the shadows, unknown to all humans. These 10 people share their creepiest experiences with cryptids and unknown creatures. My friends and I, about 20 years ago, had a very strange encounter when walking late at night down a rural road not too far out of town. It's farm country, and there was a cornfield to the west of us, and also to the east of the road. There was something in the corn, making panting noises like a large dog that is very hot. It crossed the road behind us and seemed to be making pace with us as we went north. It was late, around 2 a.m., and it frightened us to say the least, because it was so dark that we couldn't see far in front of our own faces, and just the dark outlines of the cornfields and closed road shrubs. There was a moon, but there was a very few peaks of light because it was so cloudy in the early summer nights, and I remember it was also very warm out. I cannot recall if there was a full moon or not. We could hear it moving through the field. One of the guys had enough and chucked a fist-sized rock chest high straight at where he thought the sound was coming from and made a direct hit with something very solid that yelped and then howled like an injured dog. Then it growled loudly, and a bit further off this time though. We took off running because the house we were heading to was close now. Before that, we did see some yellow eyes at one point, and we thought that they were in a low tree. When the moon had peeked out though, I did not see it myself, but one of the guys thought that it was standing upright under the tree and not in it. About the height of a tall man maybe, and there was a roadkill kind of smell in the area. That was one long walk, about 1.5 miles, and when I see the people who were with me, I see them less now that we're older, but we've moved on with separate lives. We still nervously mention it to each other once in a while. And yes, we have to have a few drinks before we start talking. But it's definitely a creepy and interesting experience that I definitely can't explain. I have a story for you. This happened to me 2 years ago at my house in the early morning hours. Around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, if I can remember correctly. I was doing some chores around the house, and the last thing to do was to mop my bathroom floor. It took me about 10 or 15 minutes, and when I was done, I took the mop and mop bucket outside to let the mop dry and dump the bucket. I dumped the bucket over the backyard fence. Now, before I continue with the story, I want to clarify some details. I have a cow pasture that's facing the east side of my house. To the south side is my neighbor's house, and the east side of the house is the back door, where the west has the front door. Which at this time, the doorknob to the back door would jam and not lock, so I had to wiggle it to lock it up before going to bed. Now, as I'm walking back to the back door, I go up the stairs to the door, and I saw something in my peripheral vision. I look out my neighbor's front yard to see something leaned over their porch like a little kid who is trying to see something in the water at the edge of the dock. It snaps itself up to a crouching position and looks directly at me. Now, from what I thought at first was my neighbor, I thought he was looking for his cat or something like that. I know it's strange, but it's just what I thought at first. But Its hair was way longer than his. Like it had hair that hung a foot over the porch deck. My neighbor's hair only went to his shoulders. Another thing that struck it as strange was that it had white, glowing eyes, and the rest of its body could make out was just jet black. I was stuck there, frozen in fear, as it looked as if its eyes were growing. I snapped out of it. I went inside, wondering what it is I saw. I went on, and as I did before, but more alert when I was outside at night. 2 weeks passed by, and I pushed it out of my mind, as it could have been my neighbor and I was just imagining the creepy parts of it. It was around the same time in the morning when I last saw it, when I was walking my dog, and nothing out of the ordinary happened until I went around to the front of my house. As I got closer to the front porch, I saw a head bobbing up and down, looking at my kitchen window. I thought it was a cat at first, until I got near the screen door. I heard my trash can knock over, and I saw a black humanoid figure jump off the porch towards the south, then dart east towards the cow pasture. My dog pulled me towards it, as I saw it jump 6 feet in the air and over a barbed wire fence. What really freaked me out about this was after it jumped the fence, it stopped and looked at me. It stood there, it was like 5 or 6 feet tall, and it had those same white glowing eyes and long hair that was down to its knees. It didn't have hair anywhere else. I don't know what it is. I haven't seen it again, and thank God for that. I live in northern Oklahoma, in a small town. I've read the stories about skinwalkers, and I've listened to them from here. Okay, now it's time to tell what happened on my own encounter. I was walking home on a moonlit night. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I made it to the train tracks when I heard a tree branch snap. I looked in the direction of where it had come from, and I saw it. Right there, about 20 feet away from me, I saw what appeared to be a deer crawling in an open field. Now, one thing you should know about me at the time, I was a gun fanatic, so I always carried a small gun or a small firearm. I did the stupidest thing. I shot at it with my pistol. I missed, and oh my God, it stood up on its hind legs. It scared the shit out of me because I knew whatever it was not natural. I ran as fast as I could to my house. The one thing that scared me the most was that it was chasing me. I finally made my way to the house, and I looked back and I saw that it was walking to the tree line, and it kept going until I couldn't see it. The one thing that was going off in my mind was that I should go look for it tomorrow. I couldn't sleep that night at all because I thought it was going to come back. In the summer of 2004, in Butte Falls, Oregon, my 2 brothers and I went and stayed with my aunt, uncles, and cousins in Oregon for 10 days. One night, we set up a TV on a stump outside the house and brought our sleeping bags out as well. Me, my 2 brothers, and 3 cousins, all teenage boys, were all enjoying the movies. And deep about halfway through the 3rd movie, it was about midnight, and maybe a little later, we heard a deep boom. And when I say boom, I don't mean like a loud blast. I mean like a deep boom that you hear when you feel the ground shaking. We paused the movie, and there was another boom. We were all on our feet at this point. Boom. It sounds like huge footsteps coming towards us. My aunt and uncle came outside as well. Boom. Boom. I felt dread well up inside me. I ran into the house and hid in a corner expecting to be squished by something massive. Boom. Boom. I could hear the sounds of distress outside. I decided I want to see what it was, even if I was going to die under a massive foot. I went outside. Boom. Boom. The steps stopped at the edge of our field of vision, maybe 40 to 50 yards away. My uncle shakily tried to tell us it was fireworks from the next town over. The next town is over an hour away, and fireworks don't boom through the earth. I had forgotten about this, and frankly, it still creeps me out. I don't think it was a Sasquatch. Don't think Sasquatch is quite Godzilla status. This happened when I was 7 years old, to my uncle. He's no longer with us, and I want to share his story. Growing up, I lived in northern Michigan, on 5,000 acres of farm and ranch land that backed up into state land. Nothing but miles of forest and pasture could be seen. Needless to say, it made us pretty tough, and it takes a lot to spook us. We are all avid hunters, fishermen, and outdoorsmen. Being the only girl, I was raised as a tomboy, and I'm just the same. My uncle went off to join the military, becoming a senior NCO in a prominent Special Forces division of the US Navy. He was 6'4", built like a wrestler, obviously skilled in survival tactics, and nothing rattled him. He was home on leave, and went out hunting as it was deer season. I remember him coming into the house, shaking and crying, saying he saw something in the woods. My uncle never cried. He was tough as nails and would tear someone to shreds before he let them make him cry. My grandmother tried to get him to make sense, but he kept saying he saw Bigfoot mixed with a wolf. My granny immediately got my grandfather, and he rounded up the rest of the guys. They were going to go hunting, so they grabbed my dad, a few male cousins, my uncle, who was still terrified but went because he didn't want to be labeled a chicken. They got all their shotguns and ammunition, and they saddled up their horses to go clear the woods. Apparently, they were aware of the dog man, but I was blissfully young and ignorant. They told me to stay inside, and for no reason was I to step outside of our house until they returned. I had never heard my grandfather or dad or anyone so serious, so I hid in my room. The sunset comes, and they still aren't back. I'm really worried at this point because they never stayed out in the woods until after dark. Shortly, I heard the sound of the horses running to the barn and their voices. I was so relieved. They looked troubled when they came into the house, but didn't say anything, probably not to spook me. At dinner, my dad laid down the law. I was no longer allowed to play outside or go to the barns alone. I had to have my grandfather with me at all times. Of course, I was upset by this and felt my independence was being taken away, but I obeyed. The next morning, my dad and grandfather taught me how to shoot. I knew it was serious. I overheard the adults talking the next night. Apparently, there were tracks where my uncle had his sighting. They were bigger than any wolf could make, but they were definitely dog tracks. As I said before, we are avid outdoorsmen and hunters. We can identify tracks easily, but these couldn't be identified. About 8 feet up into the tree were claw marks. No Michigan bear could make those. We also found claw marks about the same height on multiple trees throughout our property. We found cattle mutilated and not in the way a coyote or a bear would, and it lasted the entire winter. We lost about 30 to 40 cattle that winter, all of them mutilated, all with the same wolf and dog tracks in the snow. I really felt that this experience changed my uncle. Who knows? He did multiple tours in the Middle East for Desert Storm and OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom, before he committed suicide. After that experience, though, he was never the same. He went from not ever drinking to never seeing him without a bottle of Jack, and his eyes were always haunted. He changed his personality and never went out in the woods again. He quit hunting, and even eventually just quit coming home to visit on leave. He didn't come home for my dad's funeral 2 years later. It was heartbreaking to see him deteriorate the way he did. I truly believe he saw something out there, and it ultimately killed him. I am a shaman for the Seminole Native American tribe here in Georgia. I had heard that a dogman was being seen near one of our burial grounds and probably trying to collect souls. I told the elders of my future going there to try to banish him. They warned of it following me if I fail. I arrived one night and felt the presence in the air starting to get thicker and thicker. I started my ritual with my magical tools, and as I got the going faster, I saw red eyes staring at me just at the edge of the sacred ground. I would move to all sides of the grounds, snarling, growling, and showing aggravation as I mounted my spell. All of a sudden, a blue mist, huge ball exploded and started fading away. I felt the air cleaning and feeling fresher. I went home. 2 days later, I went outside and saw a huge paw print on the side of my house. Even the claws showed their prints. Claws and fingernails do not make prints. I called a friend who's a game warden. He said that the only thing that could make that mark was the back hind foot of a bear or something else. It was 3.5 feet off the ground. He said it was nearly impossible. Elder Red Father says it's the Dogman, an evil entity, never human, who followed me. It knows my powers and is scared of what I can do. I guess the battle continues. It took moving 1,000 miles away to finally feel comfortable enough to tell you this story. This happened just before my senior year of high school, over a period of 3 weeks in the summer. I was 17 years old, drug-free and sober. At the most, I took Advil for headaches every now and again. I just want to assure you, I was not on any mind-altering substances or long-term medication that could have affected my cognitive ability. During the summer, my curfew was 11 p.m., and this occurred while driving home from my at-the-time boyfriend's house, which took roughly 15 minutes, so let's say it was probably about 10:45 at night. I was full of energy at this age, and a night owl, so I was not even remotely tired. In fact, I was hyped up with the warm summer nighttime breeze, car windows down, singing along to the radio. I took a shortcut through the back roads to avoid going into a tiny city with its jerks cops, so I always used these roads. It was super straight, and it was flat, so it was really easy to get across. I could really speed, and that's what feels great when you're a teenager. But right before that road, I had to take 2 very close turns to get onto it. First, I'd take a right turn that was probably more than 90 degrees, almost back the way I'd come. Then, in exactly half a mile, I would turn left onto a long straight road where I could really put the gas pedal down. Since it was only half a mile, I normally didn't speed up that much because the small stretch of road was more like a packed gravel, and it would be a waste if I would have to slow down again to turn left on a much better road where I could just let loose. The tiny property on the inside corner of the left turn is where this all went down. A house had recently been built there, 2 stories with a detached garage, and it seems odd how quickly it had been built. It's like it was done overnight. Week 1. I am positively jamming to my music. The wind whipping through my car feels great and I'm relaxed in a very familiar drive home. I slow down to make my right turn onto the rough rural road, just being and bopping along with my lights. They illuminate something stunning sitting on the corner of the road. It's a wolf. A real wolf. A solid white wolf. I know the difference in my dog breeds and a wolf. I love watching dog competitions, wildlife documentaries, and I've even met a 1/4 wolf in person. They look different from domestic dogs. This was a wolf, and it was amazing and blowing my mind. I slowed down even more while I turned down my music. I'm getting close to it, and I notice that it's not minding me at all. It is sitting perfectly still in the corner of the road, staring at the house, almost unblinking. Its ears didn't even flick towards me. All its attention was focused on this house. I was so close I could have reached out my window and brushed the fur on the back of its head. I was smiling and amazed, but my mind was already churning. It made no sense for a wolf to be behaving like that, even less for there to be a white wolf in the rural North Alabama in the summer. I came to a complete stop behind it, marveling at its fur and presence. I felt euphoric, like I had seen something rare and blessed. My mind made a jump to the local Indian stories of animal spirit guardians, and I started to wonder. I couldn't stay though. My mom would have never believed me if I told her I was late because of a spirit wolf. With a sigh, I said goodbye to my wolf friend and drove home in a better mood than ever. I got to see something special, and it filled me with emotions of joy and peace. Week 2. I was driving home again, and I had been taking extra care to keep an eye out for my wolfy buddy, hoping to see him again around that area, so I drove extra slow with my window down and radio off. That was a horrible mistake. I should have realized that the presence of a guardian meant danger. Alas, it was on a short road approaching the new little house. Then, I saw the thing that to this very day makes me question my sanity, my reality, and the possibility of eldritch terrors as Lovecraft described. It was crouched right before their mailbox, its limbs folded and pulled in tight, with its hunched posture, yet its head was still taller than the box. It was molted green and black with undertones of blue. It looked wet and slimy all over. Its head was elongated, allowing for an extended maw full of razor-sharp teeth. The upper half of its body looked emaciated, with barely more than frog-like thin skin pulled over angular long bones, ropey muscles to hold it upright, and at the end of its grossly stretched arms were equally terribly long fingers, while its legs had bulk to them and looked equipped for running, with black, facing knees for sprinting, and tipped and raptor-like curved claws. It looked tall, maybe 7 feet, maybe more, just folded up into this predator's posture, waiting for the prey. Then there were its eyes, solid black and sunken. I still want to vomit, thinking about its eyes looking at me. Then I realized, it's going to look at me. It's going to see me, and there is no avoiding it. Panic and terror, unique to this alien thing, swallowed me instantly. Feeling like I was tilting off the world I had always known and into an abyss where monsters like this exist. I couldn't breathe, but I had to get my window up. I had to get my window up or I would be ripped up by those teeth and torn apart by those claws. Blood would adorn the cabin of my car, and I would become an unsolved mystery. I had a manual crank window. Fuck me. I had a crank window because I was scared of crashing into the water, not being able to get out of my car, but now I realized that there were far worse things in this world than crashing into water. Its head was turning towards me, and I had let off the gas, but I was still getting closer to it. It made me want to scream, but I had to get my window up first. I was cranking it as hard as I could. I was starting to cry as I finally got the window closed and then put my pedal to the floor. The gravel road, be damned. I thought I must not look at it as I pass. I must not look at it or make direct eye contact. I just shouldn't. It's not good to connect with these things. I've already seen too much. My tires had found grip, and I started to launch forward, passing it. In my peripheral vision, I could see it starting to unfold its limbs, and it sent a terrible chill down my spine. I'm screwed. I'm really screwed. Shit, shit, shit. I was mumbling through my tears as I slid around the turn, fishtailing for a moment before I rocketed down the road. I felt sick, and my heart was hammering. I had snot and tears rolling down my face, and my hands were shaking. I glanced in the rearview mirror and could not only see the darkness, as there were no street lamps out there. I used a trick I've mentioned in one of my other stories to tap the brakes soft enough that the lights come on, but not to actually slow down. Red lit up the dust that was billowing up in my wake. But amidst the swirling chaos, I thought I saw a darker shadow than the rest. A tall, thin shadow. I had enough and decided I was going to drive straight to the lighted roads and not let off the gas again until the rest of the way. No more looking back. I was going to drive 109 miles per hour, which is as fast as I can go before my governor kicks in. I even ran a stop sign at the end of the road, because I was not going to get caught by this thing if I could help it. I took a right onto the highway and flew home. I might have even been relieved to be pulled over, but I did not. When I got home, no one was awake. I was pretty trusted to come home on time, so I called my boyfriend and cried to him for a long time before I was able to explain. He was dismissive and thought I was pulling a joke on him. Then he thought I was just being crazy and seeing things. There's many reasons we didn't stay together, but his insensitivity contributed for sure. Week 3. I refused to take that shortcut anymore. For that reason, I would have to leave my boyfriend's house a bit early, and he'd been making fun of me about it all week. One of the days we went to a park to walk around, and on the way back, he decided he wanted to drive by the house where I saw the thing. I was hysterically begging him not to drive me there, but he would not be dissuaded. As we got closer, I could not stop him. I leaned in my passenger seat all the way back and pulled myself down, covering in panic and getting near the place. I hid below the window and covered my eyes while panting heavily, reliving the traumatic night in my mind again. At one point, the car stopped. "Spooky. You have to see this," he said. "No," I whined, resisting him, pulling at my arm. "No, you really have to see this. Look," he said in a changed tone of astonishment. Tears in my eyes as I uncurled and slowly peeked over the rim of the window. The house was gone, burnt clear down to the foundation, with only a handful of framing beams still standing. The ground around the house was blackened in a perfect large circle. My boyfriend started to get out of the car. I shouted, "No! Let's get out of here!" While I grabbed for his arm, but he easily avoided me to get out. He walked around the ashy piles of the ruins for a bit, using a stick to poke at this and that. When he finally came back, he had an intense look of thinking on his face. There was no evidence of any personal belongings, furniture, power wiring, or even interior walls. It doesn't seem like anything else burnt out of the house besides the frame. Something's kind of weird. When we got to this house, he searched for news articles about any house fires in the area, and there weren't any. He called the closest fire station and was quickly brushed off by the person that answered, as they didn't know about a fire there and didn't have time to find more quickly or anything, so they just hung up on him. I never wanted to see that place again. I went out of my way to avoid the roads in that area. Talking about it still just makes my chest tighten, my skin crawl, and my eyes water. My brain still has trouble, because I know what I saw. A thing that is not like any creature known to humans. Yet, I still saw it. The earliest encounter I can remember having with something unnatural, seems like the best word for it, was when I was little. I lived on a farm in Texas that was about an hour away from the nearest town. We did have neighbors, but only about 2, and they weren't exactly nearby. We had some big animals on the farm, cows and bulls mainly, but nothing that was predatory besides the house cats and relatively small domesticated dogs we and our neighbors had. We lived in a farmhouse with higher than normal windows in case it floods. It did a lot. The windows were about 5 feet off the ground at the sill. I know that it wasn't just my lower perspective because my mother has pictures from back then. She's 5'3" and she hasn't grown at all since then. Anyway, one night I was sleeping in the living room. I used to do that as an excuse to play with my toys longer, and I woke up absolutely terrified. The air felt weird, like it's charged with energy, and I remember trying to hide under my blankets before I even registered anything else was happening. After what was probably only a few moments, I heard something big walking around outside. We had a wooden porch, and I could hear the sound of heavy paws and deep breathing coming from outside. As it was pacing, I peeked out from under my blankets and out the window. That's when I saw what looked like an animal's back fur pass by the window. It looked almost like the way a hyena's shoulder fur bristles look, not like any dog I'd ever seen. Retrospectively, my angle on the floor where I was hiding to the window, it would have been 5'5" or maybe even taller. It spent the next, what felt like hours, but was likely no more than 1 or 2 minutes at most, pacing back and forth outside, breathing, sniffing, and occasionally growling quietly. This growl sounded like if you take a normal dog's growl and then turn the pitch way down. It was almost all bass, and even with it growling quietly, it felt like the noise was coming from almost right next to me or from inside my window. Now, I know it sounds like it was just a wolf of some kind, but there weren't any wolves in the area. Literally, none for dozens of miles. I've also come across wolves, and none of them feel like this thing did. It had a kind of pleasure, almost like it distorted the world around it by just existing. I have no clue what it was or why it even showed up in the first place. All I do know is that it was unnatural and wrong. I don't remember seeing any footsteps or anything else in the morning, and no one else believed me. I also know that none of the cattle were hurt or gone, which honestly just disturbs me more. If it were hungry, then would it have tried to take or eat one of them? If they had been spooked by whatever was getting close to them, then our neighbors would have definitely woken up, and they didn't, which means I can only assume that it was only interested in humans, or us specifically. I haven't seen anything like that for years, and when I did, I wasn't even in America, so I doubt that it was the same one, but I guess you never know with these things. I apologize for the length. I can be a bit long-winded, but I will keep sending more experiences as I have the moment to spare. These events happened in the year of 2002 in Michigan. I'm a bit of a loner, and at the time, I spent most of my days hunting, fishing, or working as a freelance carpenter or handyman for neighboring towns. I lived in a wooden cabin that I built on a small amount of land that I owned that sat not too far from Lake Huron. I always craved isolation, and I had the perfect setup for it. People never bothered me unless they had inquiries about fixing up their house or crafting a piece of furniture. I had everything the way I needed it to be, but something decided to post up on my land that would mark the end of my days of solitude. I remember being a practically cold and snowy December day when I first saw it. Huge, powdery flakes floated down and onto my roof with light thumps as I sat around my fireplace, warmth coating me while I cooked some rabbit stew. As I reached into the cauldron to pour some of the stew into my bowl, I heard a loud shriek coming from outside the cabin. It was so loud and abrupt that I dropped the scalding hot bowl onto my legs and the floor. "Shit!" I yelled as the bowl shattered. I picked myself up, grabbed my rifle, and swung open the door to find whatever it was that screwed up my dinner. The snow was falling heavily as I patrolled around the cabin. My footsteps crunched loudly into the white ground as I searched the surrounding area, but I could not seem to locate the source of the sound. The bitter cold was starting to constrict me as the small amount of adrenaline was beginning to wear off. It must have been at least 10 below, so I turned back to my cabin, but it was then that I saw that what must have been the creature that made that shriek. On the opposite side of the cabin, I saw an animal laying in the blinding white sheet of snow, and I thought it must have been a large raccoon or groundhog. I trudged my way through the snow towards it, but as I got closer, I saw that it was something else. A mostly eaten deer laid on the ground as fresh blood was still seeping out of its shredded stomach and throat. Its legs were gone, and pretty much all that remained was a head attached to a mangled torso, fear still present in its glossy eyes. My mind immediately shifted to bear, but even a bear couldn't have done this damage so quickly. Wolves, maybe? It was right then that I noticed a set of tracks that led up to the carcass, not those of a wolf or a bear. They looked almost like human tracks. However, one of the reoccurring prints was so noticeably bigger than the other. I stepped back and began to back away from the deer. As I turned my head, I noticed a similar set of tracks through the huge, falling snowflakes that led into the nearby forest. I followed them, but I began to feel uneasy as I approached the tree line. The snow was falling heavier by the second, and it was starting to become difficult to see at all. I thought I saw a flash of something race by me, maybe about 30 feet to my right, but I didn't hear any sounds. I made my way over to where I thought I saw the flash, and felt anxiety fill me as I saw the same set of tracks leading towards my cabin. I quickly shifted my gaze to the cabin, and in between the falling snow, I could see a figure standing beside the house. "Hey!" I yelled out. "This is private property. You best leave now if you don't want a bullet in your head." I raised my rifle and jogged my way towards it. As I approached it, something just seemed so very wrong. It didn't look like a person. Its skin was whiter than the snow, and it had an unnatural figure that twitched and writhed in front of me. I lost my focus as I gazed upon this monstrosity and tripped in the deep snow. As I picked myself up and wiped the frost from my face, I saw it sprinting off in the distance, well over 100 yards away. I stood up and took aim, but it moved faster than anything I have ever seen before. Before I knew it, it was completely out of sight. I quickly raced inside and barred the door shut and just sat there for a while. What the hell just happened? I thought to myself. A few weeks passed by and I sat up late, every single night wondering if that thing would show itself once more. I didn't know what it was, but curiosity was starting to nag me as I spent my days sitting on the porch, scanning my land, to find nothing at all. I have left my property and have made sure that I am constantly surrounded by my family, so that thing can't get to me again. But every white flash of snow takes me back to that tree stand where it took piece of me for itself. I live in West Virginia, but I work between there and Eastern Ohio. I am a vendor. I don't want to say the company's name. And today, something happened to me as I was strapping down my truck after I had just finished servicing a store. I was in Barnesville, Ohio, and was just securing my load in the back of the truck when I heard what sounded like, "Help me!" from a wooded area next to the parking lot. I was parked at the edge of it. Naturally, I stopped and listened to see if there was someone in need. There is a local Amish community, and a horse and buggy were parked about 30 feet from my truck. No one was inside, though. The sound was coming from the opposite direction. I listened, and sure enough, I heard it again. It was clear as a bell. "Help me!" The thing was, it just sounded off to me, like it was just on the line of not being human. It reminded me of when you hear a crow talk, but with a higher pitch, as though it were a child or a woman, and not so exaggerated. I called out to the woods, "Are you okay?" Nothing. I heard it again, only this time, the horse was starting to snort and squirm. I have heard enough podcasts and read enough stories about things in the woods mimicking human speech just to say one-word responses. I finished strapping down the truck and got the hell out of there. I'm not sure what this is. I thought that skinwalkers were mostly reported in the western US. Has anyone ever heard of them being in the Appalachians before? Or is this possibly something completely different?